I was so livid that I realized that this guy is now a serving congressman. He doesn't deserve that job. It's horrendous that he could lie and steal and cheat his way through life, and now he's somebody that we are supposed to trust. It's just disgusting. It's horrible.
That Navy veteran is accusing Congressman George Santos of raising money to save his dying therapy dog back in 2016 and then keeping the money for himself. Santos did not respond to a request for comment from NBC News, but he has responded with a tweet. Quote, "The reports that I would let a dog die is shocking and insane. My work in animal advocacy was the labor of love and hard work. Over the past 24 hours, I've received pictures of dogs I helped rescue throughout the years, along with supportive messages. These distractions won't stop me." And if that wasn't enough, I keep saying, let's move on from George, let's move on from George, but these things keep happening. The latest, a Brazilian drag performer recently posted a photo of herself and another person in drag who she claims is George Santos and looks a whole lot like George. He tweeted that accusation was categorically false. Santos has apologized for lying about his background and has said he has done nothing unethical. Let's discuss with Symone Sanders Townsend, former chief spokesperson for Vice President Harris and host of the show Symone on Peacock and MSNBC, and Mark McKinnon, former advisor to both George W. Bush and John McCain. He is one of the co-hosts of The Circus on Showtime. Symone, I get it. 2 weeks ago, Kevin McCarthy needed Santos's vote. McCarthy has the gavel now. At what point does he move George Santos from the asset column to the liability column and send him packing?
Well, I think the thing that Republicans in the House are weighing, Steph, is in fact that the majority is very slim. And so every seat matters. And fortunately or unfortunately for Republicans, George Santos is a seat that matters. Can I just say, as a former communications professional, the thing for me that was really the rub was the statement that he put out on Twitter, and he says he's received photos. Comms 101, let's get the validators and put them out there. Where are these people? Send them to the reporters that requested comment from Congressman Santos. Have them post their own. We have not seen these individuals, and I'm concerned we haven't seen them because they possibly don't exist.
I was thinking that same thing. If all these people came forward, show us your cute little pups. Mark, same question to you.
Well, what's playing out is that Kevin McCarthy's short-term strategy of seating people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and not throwing George Santos out on his ear immediately just testifies to the fact that they were more interested in the short-term gain than the long-term strategic downside for Republicans, which is that the public now is just seeing that they really don't care about character, about integrity, about anything other than that slim majority of votes that they're hanging on to. And George Santos is Exhibit A. I mean, look how much oxygen he has taken up, and look how much oxygen Marjorie Taylor Greene and the others of the crazy caucus have taken up just in the last 2 weeks. I think Americans were hoping that with the divided government, they'd get Republicans to normalize, and they've gotten just the opposite. And, the thing with George Santos is that the story just gets worse and worse and worse, and it just gets more oxygen. And the bigger question now is anything that George Santos ever said true? If George Santos walks like a duck, he talks like a duck. Ladies and gentlemen, George Santos is a duck.
Okay, well, there is obviously nothing wrong, Mark, with being a drag queen performing in drag, but a whole lot of Republicans have taken issue with it this year. How does that go over with them?
Well, that's it, and that's why you can feel them squirming in their seats, because the worst thing you can do in politics really is be a hypocrite, and this is an example where George Santos is sort of standing up on the side of people who've worked actively against people in this community, and it turns out he was part of that community. So it's one thing to stand up and say that or deny that what you're doing. It's another thing to have others saying, well, listen, he was with us and standing with us, and now he's standing against us.
Symone, let's talk about these committee assignments, because Politico is reporting that some in the White House are, quote, excited over these far-right radical Republicans ending up on the Oversight Committee. You work for this White House. I don't know. That doesn't sound right. Should they be happy about this? Shouldn't they care about good governing, whatever side of the aisle you're on?
Well, Steph, I am doing some very master lip reading right now because I dropped a little of my IFB. But I saw what you put up on the screen, and I could imagine your question was, how could they be excited about this? And I think I would just say, look, oversight is going to be quite difficult when it comes for this White House, regardless of who is on that committee. With the people who are currently on it, it is truly red meat for the base. I would argue that it quite possibly be preliminary for some of my former colleagues to be excited about this. We think that, you know, everyone is like us, keyed in politicos who are paying attention to the details, who care about everything down to the nitty gritty. But the reality is the majority of the American people, they read headlines. They only see sound bites. And the things that have the potential to come out of this oversight committee, of the hearings that they will do, of the investigations that they will open, they have the potential to break through to the American people if they are not properly countered by folks either in the White House or allies of the president. And if the documents situation that the president is currently dealing with is any example, I think that outside allies have struggled to rally around the president in a way in which I think they should. So I don't know if I would be high-fiving, but these are not serious folks that Kevin McCarthy has put on this committee.
Damn, you are a master lip reader. If we knew how good you were, you should have been here between the 14th and 15th vote so we could have known what all those Republicans were saying to one another on the floor 2 weeks ago. Mark, what do you think the impact is going to be from these far-right Republicans on committees?
Here's the problem, Stephanie. The problem is going to be when oversight becomes overreach. And it's pretty clear that when you put the kind of people on these committees who've made a name for themselves by leading the Freedom Caucus and by putting up outrageous charges and calling for just the sort of investigations that are so beyond the pale, this is the sort of thing where McCarthy has a predecessor in the Republican Party, and when he jumped the shark was when he started calling for, when he went beyond, he first was out in communists in the Congress, and then he began investigating the Army. So now Kevin McCarthy's got people on oversight committees that are now starting to investigate the FBI and other security forces in America. So that's the sort of thing where people are going to say, no, wait a minute, that's when we want oversight, that's not what we're talking about.